The alley was dark and quiet, save for the hum of the city behind it. A single street lamp flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to swallow the narrow path. The night air carried the sharp scent of rain, though it hadn't rained in hours. It was as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Before we begin this journey, I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Think of a time when you felt completely alone, when the weight of your world seemed unbearable, and then, just when you thought you couldn't carry it any longer, someone reached out to you. That's the power of human connection. It's raw, unexpected, and it can heal even the deepest of wounds. If that resonates with you, then you're in the right place. If you want to hear stories that restore your faith in kindness, in the strength of the human spirit, and in love that comes when you least expect it, please subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss the next part of our journey. Now, let me tell you a story about one man's life, how a simple act of kindness turned into a revelation that would change everything. Please consider subscribing. Now, let's begin. And then, out of nowhere, there was a sound. A weak, labored gasp, barely audible but unmistakable. Ellis Harper, a man who lived a life of quiet solitude, had walked this alley many times before. But tonight was different. The streets felt emptier, the silence heavier. It wasn't until he turned the corner that he saw her, lying in a heap, her clothes torn, her face bruised, and blood seeping into the cracked pavement beneath her. He froze. His heart slammed against his ribs. She wasn't just anyone. She was a woman, the kind you saw on billboards and in magazines, with perfect hair, perfect makeup, and a life that seemed unreachable. But this woman, she looked nothing like the glamorous images the world had painted her as. She was broken, her once pristine dress stained with dirt and her skin ashen, like a forgotten doll discarded in the shadows. Ellis took a step forward. He could feel his body moving before his brain could process what was happening. His instincts kicked in. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way she clung to life in that cold, deserted alley. Maybe it was the way the city had been cruel to her. But he couldn't walk away. Not this time. He knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he touched her, feeling the warmth of her skin mixed with the ice of the concrete. "Hey!" he whispered, the word barely leaving his lips. "Stay with me." Her eyelids fluttered, and she gasped, struggling to lift her head. A sliver of light from the street lamp caught the edges of her face. Her eyes, though bloodshot, were strikingly familiar, a deep shade of blue that seemed to pierce through the darkness. "Please, help." Her voice was barely a whisper, as though even speaking was a monumental effort. Ellis didn't hesitate. He scooped her up, cradling her fragile body in his arms, not caring that his jacket was soaked in blood or that the street was empty. He needed to get her out of here. He needed to save her. His heart pounded in his chest as he made his way to the nearest hospital, the cold wind stinging his face, his breath shallow. With every step, the weight of her body in his arms felt heavier. The sirens that followed him to the emergency room were nothing compared to the urgency in his chest. The doctors worked quickly, pulling her from his arms and into the sterile white light of the hospital. Ellis stood there in the cold hallway, waiting. He could hear the beeping of machines, the shuffle of nurses' feet, the muffled voices of doctors. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he'd just witnessed. Who could have done this to her? And why? The woman, her name, he learned later, was Amelia Grace, was found to be a billionaire heiress, someone who had everything on the outside but nothing inside. She lived a life of perfection, or at least the kind that society deemed perfect. But that perfect life, it had been shattered in an instant. As Ellis sat in the hospital waiting room, his mind kept drifting back to the moment he found her. Something in her eyes had drawn him in, something familiar, something that, despite her obvious wealth, felt human. She wasn't just an object to be pitied. She was a person, a woman who had suffered, who had fought for survival, just like him. Days passed. Amelia's condition improved, but when she finally woke up, her eyes were filled with a strange mix of gratitude and something darker, a secret she wasn't ready to share. She barely spoke to anyone. The doctors told him she would need time to heal, that she had suffered more than just physical injuries. But Ellis wasn't prepared for what she said to him when she finally opened her eyes, weeks later. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice raspy, yet filled with emotion. Ellis leaned forward, his heart in his throat. "For saving me," she continued. "But you don't know who I am. You don't know what I've done." He frowned, a chill crawling up his spine. "It doesn't matter who you are. I saw you and I had to help." But the words she spoke next would make his blood run cold. They would change the course of his life forever. Ellis stood at the edge of the sterile hospital bed, a quiet unease settling in his chest. Amelia's eyes were fixed on the ceiling, distant and hollow, as though she was wrestling with a truth that was too heavy for anyone else to bear. The words she had spoken earlier, about not knowing who she really was, echoed in his mind. And now, as he watched her, he could feel the weight of her silence pressing against him. The faint beep of the heart monitor was the only sound that filled the room, rhythmic and steady. Ellis had never been good at waiting. He was a man of action, of hard work and measured progress. But in this sterile white room, everything felt suspended, frozen in time. He had saved her. That much he was sure of. But what now? What happened when you save someone only to realize that they weren't just lost, but perhaps already broken beyond recognition? Amelia's voice, soft but clear, broke through his thoughts. "Ellis," she said, her lips barely moving. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done." His heart stilled. He had known something was coming, some piece of her past that she hadn't shared. It was in the guarded way she looked at him, the way she held herself so tightly, like a fragile glass that might shatter if touched too hard. "It doesn't matter who you are," Ellis replied, his voice steady. "You're here. That's all that matters." But Amelia turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze with eyes full of something he hadn't expected. There was no anger, no resentment, only a deep, aching sorrow that seemed to ripple beneath the surface. "Do you really think so?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think you can save me?" Ellis wasn't sure how to answer that. The words felt too simple, too inadequate. What was he saving her from? Was it the bruises and broken bones that marred her body? Or was it something deeper, something far more dangerous? "I'm not here to save you," Ellis said, his voice soft. "I'm here because I couldn't leave you out there, because I saw you, Amelia, and I couldn't just walk away." The silence that followed was thick with tension, as if Amelia were weighing his words against a lifetime of experiences he couldn't possibly understand. She closed her eyes, taking a shallow breath, and for a moment, Ellis wondered if she was going to shut him out completely. But then she spoke. "Do you know who I am?" she asked, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "Not who the world says I am. Not who my name is on a paycheck or a press release. Do you know who I really am?" Ellis didn't answer right away. He hadn't known her long enough to know what was beneath the surface, what secret she was hiding. But something in him told him that this was the moment she would either open up to him or turn away completely. "No," Ellis said quietly, "but I'm willing to find out." For a long time, Amelia didn't speak. She seemed lost in her own thoughts, her gaze drifting toward the window, where the early morning sunlight was just beginning to filter through blinds, casting a soft glow on her pale face. Then, finally, she whispered, "I was once someone you would have never imagined." Ellis leaned in slightly, sensing that she was about to say something important, something that would change everything. But he didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. "I wasn't always this," she continued. "I didn't always hide from the world. I had everything, Ellis. I had the money, the power, the perfect life. People worshipped me, admired me. I was a billionaire heiress, a woman who could buy anything, have anything, do anything." Her words were so stark, so brutal in their simplicity, that Ellis could hardly comprehend them. The woman lying in front of him, broken and bruised, had once been a figure of untouchable wealth. The realization hit him like a wave crashing against a cliffside. But it wasn't just the wealth that made her unrecognizable now. It was the darkness in her eyes, the pain that lingered behind every word, every gesture. "But none of it made me happy," she whispered. "None of it saved me from the lies, the manipulation, the constant demands. The family I thought I could trust, my father, my mother, they were never the people I thought they were. They used me. They used my name, my status, my power to cover up their own sins." Ellis felt a pang of sympathy for her, but also a creeping confusion. "What do you mean?" he asked. "How?" Amelia's lips trembled as she struggled to sit up, wincing in pain as she pushed herself into a more comfortable position. "My father built his empire on the backs of others," she said. "He made deals with corrupt men, destroyed lives, and kept it all hidden. But when I found out, when I started asking questions, I became a threat to everything they had built. So they did what they had to do. They tried to silence me. They did more than that." Ellis could hear the desperation in her voice now, the trembling that betrayed the strength she had once carried with such pride. He couldn't imagine the kind of world she had lived in, the kind of abuse and betrayal she had endured. And yet, she was still here, still fighting, still breathing. "They beat me," she continued, her voice breaking. "They tried to break me, to erase me, and when that didn't work, they left me for dead. They thought that would be the end of me. But you saved me. You're the first person who's ever truly seen me. And now I don't know what to do with this truth." Ellis felt his chest tighten. The weight of her words was too much to bear. How could someone who had everything, who had power and wealth beyond imagination, be brought to the brink of death by the very people she trusted the most? "But why did you come here?" Ellis asked softly. "Why did you run?" Amelia's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time since he'd found her, she let them fall. "I had nowhere else to go. My name meant nothing anymore. My family doesn't want me. My money doesn't matter. I came here because I thought maybe you would understand. Maybe you would save me from myself." Her words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and Ellis couldn't speak for a long while. He didn't know how to process it. He didn't know how to help her. She was a stranger to him, and yet there was something in her story, something in the way she looked at him, that made him feel like he had to try. "I don't know what you expect from me, Amelia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I'm not the man you think I am. I'm just a father trying to survive. I don't have answers. I don't have the power to fix everything. But I'm here. I'm not leaving you." Amelia looked at him, her tears still fresh on her face, but something shifted in her gaze. She wasn't expecting perfection. She wasn't asking for miracles. She was asking for a lifeline, a small, quiet promise that she wasn't alone in this broken world. "You don't need to fix me," she whispered. "I just need someone to stay, someone to help me heal." Ellis nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle into his bones. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't know how to make her past disappear, but he could be there. He could be the one person who didn't walk away. As the days passed, Ellis stayed by Amelia's side, offering what little comfort he could. But the more he learned about her past, the more questions he had. There was something else, something she hadn't told him yet. And as the truth unraveled, it became clear that her story was far from over. The phone call came one night, just as Ellis was preparing dinner for them both. It was a lawyer from the family estate. The words that followed would change everything. But the truth that Amelia was still hiding, it was about to come to light in the most unexpected way.